Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In today's video, I'm going to be providing my power rankings following the first week of NBA action. However, before I get too far into it, I want to remind you all to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support that I've been receiving lately, and I hope to see that continue. I also want to say that I hope you all had a great Christmas. I took the weekend off in order to spend more time with my family. I wasn't able to watch as much basketball as usual, but I still feel like I've got a good grasp in order to update these power rankings. So without further ado, let's get right into it. I tried not to overreact too much to what happened last week, but there were some teams that I thought were necessary to move up or down in the rankings, and that's why I felt it was okay to come out with another video just 1 week following my preseason power rankings. Also, if you have any other suggestions for what kind of videos you'd like to see during this season, I am all ears. I don't have a whole lot of ideas outside from doing these power ranking videos each Monday, so let me know what you would like to see in the comments section down below. So in today's power rankings, the biggest risers from last week are the Orlando Magic, who moved up 6 spots, and the Indiana Pacers and Cleveland Cavaliers, who moved up 5 spots apiece. The biggest fallers were the Golden State Warriors, who went down 7 spots, as well as the Washington Wizards, who also went down 7 spots, and the Chicago Bulls, who went down 4 spots. Those were the biggest movers, so now let's get into the actual rankings themselves. At number 1, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. I get that this is probably going to be pretty controversial because the Clippers looked horrible today in what ended up being a 51-point loss to the Dallas Mavericks, in which they were losing by 50 points at halftime, where they scored 27 points in an entire half. But they came up with 2 huge wins over the other 2 teams that I think are the best in the Western Conference outside of the Clippers. They had great performances from Paul George and Kawhi Leonard to open up the season. I think that this team is really good. They just kind of laid an egg today, and a lot of the better teams in the league did that, so just kind of a night to forget, and I still think that this was a very successful week for the Clippers. I have them moving up to number 1 from number 2. Similar to them, at number 2, I have the Los Angeles Lakers, who moved up from number 3 to number 2. This week, they lost to the Clippers, but bounced back with wins over Dallas and Minnesota. I have them number 2 because they lost to the Clippers head-to-head, but I certainly think that they are neck and neck with the Clips and certainly could be put number 1 over them. Anthony Davis and LeBron James didn't play the most minutes to open up the season, and we saw AD take the night off tonight, or I guess last night. But Kyle Kuzma really stepped up nicely in his place, had a 20-point first half, and led the Lakers to a victory, so I've got them at number 2. At number 3, we have the Brooklyn Nets, who beat the Warriors and the Celtics before losing to the Hornets this week. Once again, the trend of really good teams losing to not so good teams on Sunday continues. And overall, I really thought that the Nets played terrific in their wins over the Warriors and Celtics. We saw great performances from Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, cementing themselves as championship contenders, and that's why I felt it was necessary to move them up from number 5 to number 3. At number 4, we have the Milwaukee Bucks, who fell all the way down from number 1 last week to number 4. They lost to Boston by 1 point on a Jason Tatum game winner, which is, whatever. And they destroyed the Warriors. So after those 2 games, I was thinking the Bucks were probably going to hang around at number 1 for another week. But then they went out and laid an absolute egg against the Knicks tonight. I don't know what happened. The Bucks couldn't hit their shots. The Knicks couldn't miss their shots. Probably just a game to throw out and forget about if you're the Bucks, but it's definitely a bit concerning if you are a fan of the Bucks, as I am. At number 5, we have the Philadelphia 76ers, who moved up a spot from number 6 last week. They started off the season with solid victories over Washington and New York before an absolute head-scratching loss to the Cleveland Cavaliers tonight. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid have played quite well, but they're going to have to bounce back from that Cleveland loss in order to stay in the top 5 of these rankings. At number 6, we have the Denver Nuggets, who fell from number 4 to number 6 this week. They went 0-2, losing to the Sacramento Kings and the Lakers. In the Kings game, we saw Jamal Murray really struggle. To the Clippers, not the Lakers. And he bounced back a little bit and played better in that Clippers game. They also should have won the Kings game according to the or not the ESPN, like the NBA's official stuff that comes out after the games. But they went 0-2, so I had to drop them from 4th to 6th. At number 7, we have the Utah Jazz, who stayed put after last week. They put up an impressive win over Portland before a frustrating loss to Minnesota. The Portland win showed the great stuff that this team is capable of doing, with the offense firing on all cylinders, knocking down all their three-point looks, and the defense looking great with Rudy Gobert as the centerpiece. I think he had like 20 points and 17 rebounds in that game. And then against Minnesota, they really struggled and looked like the Jazz of old that was very mistake-prone. So we're going to have to see them bounce back from that loss in order to keep this high standing. However, I'm still very high on this team, and they looked great in that Portland win, so I've got them sticking around at number 7. At number 8, we have another team that stood pat from last week, and that's the Miami Heat. They lost to the Orlando Magic to open up the season, but bounced back with a victory over the New Orleans Pelicans. We have seen some good performances from their players, but the biggest thing to take away from this week is the potential Jimmy Butler injury, as he left early in the Pelicans game. I haven't heard too much about that and the severity of the injury, but certainly something to keep your eye on from the Heat's perspective. At number 9, we have the Boston Celtics, who once again stayed in the same spot as last week. The Celtics beat the Bucks in an impressive opening night win where Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown both had 30-plus points, and Tatum knocked in a bank shot with less than half a second remaining to win the game for the Celtics. However, they struggled in the rest of the week, getting blown out by Brooklyn and then losing to Indiana in a close one tonight. I still have the Celtics as a top 10 team because the two squads that they lost to in Brooklyn and Indiana are both likely going to be playoff teams, and they came away with one of the more impressive wins of the week in beating the Bucks, despite terrific performances from the Bucks' big three. So I have the Celtics sticking around in the top 10 despite having a losing record this week. At number 10, we have the Portland Trailblazers, who lost to Utah and beat Houston. In that Houston game, we saw CJ McCollum and Damian Lillard combine to have two terrific performances, but really it was CJ, usually the lesser of the two, who stood out. He had a 44-point effort and was terrific in overtime, where he was just trading blows with James Harden from beyond the arc. McCollum really showcased his ability as a scorer, both as a jump shooter as well as a slasher. I think that he's going to really determine how good and what the ceiling is on this Trailblazers team, but I kept them in the top 10 off of the strength of that Houston win. At number 11, we have a team that moved up one spot from number 12 in the Phoenix Suns. The Suns had a pretty impressive win over the Mavericks to open up their season, and then traded a win for a loss with the Sacramento Kings in what was a back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday nights. Mikhail Bridges has really impressed me in what I've seen from this team. I've been in love with him ever since his time with Villanova, and I think he's a really strong player with that defensive capability as a super long wing player who can guard both up and down the positional spectrum. But we've also seen him take a step forward on offense, posting multiple 18-plus point efforts. I thought that DeAndre Ayton was the most likely breakout candidate on this team, but it looks like it might be Mikhail Bridges. At number 13, we have the Dallas Mavericks, who opened up their season by losing to the Phoenix Suns and Los Angeles Lakers before bouncing back with a victory over the Los Angeles Clippers. This was an absolute drubbing of the Clippers, and really it's based off the strength of that the Mavericks were able to move up from 14 to 13. But they also looked like a solid team in those losses to the Suns and the Lakers. They were just a bit overmatched, and for that reason I can't move them higher than this, but they looked good enough in that Clippers win that there's no reason why they should drop this week. At number 14, we have the Houston Rockets, who are a team that I actually did drop from 11th to 14th. This has more to do with what the actual on-court product is for this team, with John Wall and DeMarcus Cousins and Jae'Sean Tate and some other role players being out for this Rockets team as they head into next week. once those guys come back and we see how it looks on the court, I'll be ready to get this team much closer to the top 10. But because of the absences of those players, we have them here at 14. James Harden also had a terrific game against Portland, finishing with 46 points and 17 assists, and what was just an incredible feat. It was not quite enough to get the Rockets the win, but if you're a fan of the Philadelphia 76ers or Brooklyn Nets, you have to be salivating at the idea of adding this guy to an already championship caliber core if you're one of those two teams. At number 15, rounding out the top half of this list, we have the Atlanta Hawks, who moved up from number 18 last week. They went 2-0 this week in beating the Chicago Bulls and Memphis Grizzlies. Trae Young played terrific. He also got into a bit of Twitter beef with Grayson Allen, so it'll be interesting to see how that resolves itself. But Trae has been terrific, both efficiency-wise and volume-wise as a scorer. And it really looks like this team is going to be quite good offensively. They also were missing a bunch of important rotational pieces, so it'll be very cool to see what they look like when they're at full strength. I've got them here at 15. I didn't want to overreact and move them up too high off of the strength of 1 week, but they did look quite good, and there's potential for this team to continue to move up. Number 16, we have the Orlando Magic, who completed a 3-0 week in beating the Heat and then sweeping the Wizards in a back-to-back set. This was a terrific week for the Magic as they saw terrific performances from their budding young star, according to them, fingers crossed if you're a Magic fan, in Markelle Fultz. I'm not sure that Fultz will ever get to the heights that the Magic believe that he will, but he certainly had a terrific game tonight, posting what I believe was 28 points. They still have a good veteran core in Ivan Fournier and Nikola Vucevic, and I was quite a bit lower than I should have been in ranking this team at 22. Steve Clifford is a terrific coach, and that was just inexcusable for me. I feel really silly underrating this team that badly. They deserve to be in the top 20 at the very least, and I've got them here at 16. At number 17, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, who picked up 2 wins over Toronto and San Antonio, which sandwiched a loss to the Heat on Christmas Day. The Pelicans have looked terrific offensively, with the exception of tonight, where they weren't even able to muster 100 points in a game they somehow won against the Spurs. But Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson look like 2 young players that they can build around and that are going to be very high-level threats on the offensive end of the floor. So if you are the Pelicans, you have to be happy with how you looked this week. They're going to be right in the conversation to be either like the 8th seed or in the play-in tournament, somewhere in that range throughout the whole season. And I think that their rating here at 17 reflects that quite accurately. At number 18, we have the San Antonio Spurs, who moved up from 21. They beat Memphis and Toronto before losing to New Orleans. DeMar DeRozan has been terrific. It looks like he's starting to develop a three-point shot. DeJounte Murray has also been playing very well, and it looks to be combining that all-NBA level defense he played prior to his ACL tear with the high-level offense, or at least the improved level of offense that he brought to the Spurs last season. With a combination of those two things, this guy has a very high upside of probably being like an all-star level player. So if you're a Spurs fan, that's super exciting. And if they continue to win, once again, there's room for this team to move up. The one loss that they suffered at the hands of the Pelicans was also very close. And you could reverse these two teams if you really wanted to. At number 19, we have the Toronto Raptors, who dropped a little bit from 16th last week. They went 0-2 this week, losing to the Pelicans and Spurs. I wasn't too fond of this team coming into the season. I had them as the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference, and what they've done so far has backed that up quite a bit. They haven't played very well. I haven't seen them play yet, but from the sounds of it, they're going to have to pick up their level of play if they want to succeed. They still have terrific coaching and great veteran players in the locker room, but they're simply going to have to play better in order to really be the championship contender they fancy themselves as. I'm not sure that that's even plausible, and I've got them all the way down here at 19. At number 20, we have the biggest faller of the week in the Golden State Warriors, who were number 13 prior to what we saw, but they looked absolutely awful in the losses to Brooklyn and Milwaukee, and they needed a buzzer beater from Damian Lee in order to beat the Chicago Bulls. Steph Curry has been struggling with efficiency, although he really got going at the back end of that Bulls game. And Kelly Oubre and Andrew Wiggins have just been absolutely atrocious for this team. So they're going to need those offensive weapons to really step up in order for them to hop back into the top 15 range of this power rankings list. However, I'm not doubting them too much because I think Steve Kerr is genuinely a pretty good coach, and Steph Curry is obviously a very, very elite player. That video that surfaced of him making 105 threes in a row, how is that even possible? But, Warriors are here at 20. At number 21, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves, who got off to a really strong start to their week, beating Detroit and posting a really impressive win in beating Utah before getting absolutely demolished by the Lakers without Karl Anthony Towns tonight. The main reason why I had them dropping from 19 to 21 instead of moving up from 19 into the top 15-ish range is because of that Towns injury. I think that the subtraction of him makes this team quite a bit worse, and what we saw from them tonight really backs that up. So once Towns comes back, I'll certainly elevate them and move them up in this ranking. However, without him, I don't think that this team is very good. What they've gotten from their number one overall pick, Anthony Edwards, off the bench, has been very promising so far, though. So if you want some positive takeaways, if you're a Timberwolves fan, there you go. At number 22, we have the Washington Wizards, the other biggest faller of the week alongside the Warriors. I had them 15th, and going into the season, I was really high on this team. I thought that they were going to be the 6th seed in the Eastern Conference, I think is what I said in my preseason prediction video. And that just hasn't come to fruition. They've been competitive in all 3 of their games as they nearly beat Philadelphia to open it up. And then these last 2 battles with Orlando have been quite close as well. But without Russell Westbrook tonight, it just wasn't enough. Bradley Beal has been terrific. I think he's posted 29 plus points in all 3 games so far, and he's playing at an all-NBA level. But they got to start winning games in order to be a top 20 team, or even as I had them before this week, a top 15 team. So hopefully they can bounce back and pick up some wins in this upcoming week. At number 23, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers, who moved all the way up from 28 on the back of their wins against Charlotte, Detroit, and Philadelphia. The Charlotte and Detroit wins are solid, but the really impressive one is over Philadelphia, who I have in the top 5 of these power rankings. I think this is a huge win for Cleveland, and hopefully something they can build off of going into the year. I was higher on Cleveland than most heading into the season. I had them as the 12th seed in the Eastern Conference, and I really thought that they had a chance to be pretty good. I think J.B. Bickerstaff is a good coach. Kevin Love is a high-level player and really has become underrated just because of how bad his contract is. I also thought that Colin Sexton had a real chance to take a step forward, and I had him in my top 5 of most improved player rankings going into the year. And I really should have just put this team higher on this list. I thought that they were going to be good, or not good, but at least okay, and yet I still put them in the bottom 3. I'm regretting that so far. Colin Sexton, who I thought could make a breakout, has made that breakout year so far, as he's put up really impressive stats in each of their 3 games so far. The Cavaliers look good, and if they can keep winning, they'll continue to rise up this list. I just didn't want to overreact to 1 week of good play too much in this week's rankings. At number 24, we have the Sacramento Kings, who picked up wins over Denver and Phoenix before losing to Phoenix tonight. This is another case of me not wanting to overreact, but the Kings have looked pretty good. De'Aaron Fox has been a menace. He's been all over the court. Marvin Bagley has been playing, I believe. I actually don't know. I haven't actually seen the Kings play. outside of the final minute of that Nuggets game, so I probably shouldn't say too much here, but that certainly was a fun final minute, and the Buddy Hield buzzer beater was quite exuberating. So, yep, that's it on the Kings. Impressive wins this week, but not going to overreact. I've got them here at 24, same as I did last week. At number 25, we have the Oklahoma City Thunder, who won their only game of the week against the Charlotte Hornets. I had to move this team up from where I had them at 29 because I just think that until they are able to move on from the vets like Al Horford and George Hill, this team's just going to be too good to be one of the worst teams. Or I guess they still are one of the worst in the league, but they're not going to be one of the bottom two, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. They've just got too much talent and too much experience on this roster to be that bad. Once they move on from those guys, though, yeah, their stock is going to deflate and they're going to move down. Very fun game against Charlotte, though, as we saw them allow a bit of a comeback from the Hornets before Shai Gilgeous-Alexander put an end to that by knocking down a game winner. At number 26, we have the team that was on the other end of that game winner in the Charlotte Hornets, who dropped from 23 to 26. The Hornets, if nothing else, proved that they are going to be a very exciting team this season, even if they are a bit of a bad team. I watched almost tip to buzzer of their game tonight against Brooklyn, and I was really impressed. I have loved what we've seen from Terry Rozier. He's done a great job scoring the ball thus far this season. Miles Bridges seems to have quite a bit of confidence. That's not always a great thing, but he's taking step backs and off the dribble jumpers on the offensive end of the floor, which is certainly promising. PJ Washington looked really good tonight, although from what the announcers were saying, it was his first really good game of the year, so take that for what you will. And LaMelo Ball has been inconsistent, but has shown flashes of being a really solid playmaker, and he's also knocked down some threes this year so far, so some positives for the Hornets, but overall they went 1-2 this week and lost to two pretty bad teams in Cleveland and Oklahoma City, or I guess those two teams are 4-0 combined, so I can't even say they're bad, but our priors tell us that they're bad, so I've got the Hornets dropping all the way down to being here at 26. At number 27, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who lost to the Spurs and Hawks this week. I get that this is maybe a bit too low for the Grizzlies, but I really think that the loss of Jaren Jackson hurts them. And although Ja Morant has been terrific, putting up a 44-point night in that season opener against the Spurs, I just think that they lack the spacing necessary to be a good NBA team at this point. Once Jackson comes back, I'll have to reevaluate, and this team will probably move up in the power rankings once that happens. But it has not yet happened, so this is where they are going to find themselves all the way down at 27, which is just a 1-point loss from where I had them at 26 last week. At number 28, we have the New York Knicks, who lost to Indiana and Philadelphia before pulling the biggest upset of the week, in my opinion, in beating my favorite team, the Milwaukee Bucks. Tonight is the only gameplay I've actually seen from the Knicks, and I guess I was just really impressed with their shooting. I thought that going into the year, this team was really going to struggle with that, as when looking at their roster, they had one above-average three-point shooter, and that was Alec Burks. But tonight, Elfrid Payton was knocking down threes. Julius Randle was knocking down threes. And if those guys can shoot it well, that's the recipe for success for this team. They also had a great performance from R.J. Barrett in their season opener against Indiana, where he piled up, I think, 26 points, and he followed that up with a 2-for-15 outing against Philadelphia. So this looks like it's going to be an inconsistent season from R.J., but if he shows flashes, it'll at least give Knicks fans some hope that they have found their franchise player. Number 29, we have the Chicago Bulls, who have taken losses to the Hawks, the Pacers, and as of tonight, the Warriors on that previously mentioned Damian Lee buzzer beater. The Bulls have just been really underwhelming. I didn't think this team was going to be any good, and I picked them to be 14th in the Eastern Conference, and oh boy, they don't look like they're going to be very good. I'm a supporter of them moving on from Zach LaVine because I think Kobe White is pretty good. I think he has a high ceiling, and I don't know that having Zach LaVine on the squad will allow him to reach that ceiling. So I think that moving LaVine and moving Lauri Markkanen, because I just don't really understand what his fit is in the NBA, could be some good moves for this Bulls team if they can get good value from those guys. Finally, at number 30, we have the Detroit Pistons, who lost this week to Minnesota and Cleveland. The Pistons are the Pistons. I haven't seen them play yet, so not too much to say here. I'll mostly just gloss over them, I guess. Let me know in the comments what you think. Which teams do I have too high? Which teams do I have too low? Like I said before, let me know what your thoughts are on the kind of videos that I should be making during this season. I don't have a whole lot of ideas, so I would really like some contributions from you guys in that sense. I think that I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. We've talked about all 30 teams, so that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you all again very soon.